The reason you are consistently locked out of the rooms you want to be in has absolutely nothing to do with your talent. Picture a private dinner after an exclusive industry conference. A junior executive has managed to slip in. He is sharply dressed, smiles broadly, laughs at the right moments, and tries to build a genuine human connection by sharing his hobbies and his background. The wealthy men and women at the table nod politely. They clink their glasses. But the next morning, his carefully crafted follow-up email is archived without a single reply. He was charming, he was authentic, and he was entirely useless to them. In the real world, charm is a currency for the middle class. The elite trade strictly in utility. You have been conditioned by a soft society to believe that likability is the ultimate skeleton key to success. The modern self-help industry has fed you a comfortable delusion, telling you to just be yourself, to show vulnerability, and to build natural rapport. You are taught that if you just project enough positive energy, powerful people will take an interest in your potential and invite you into their inner circle. This is a fatal miscalculation. Look closely at the men and women who actually hold power. They are not looking for new friends. They are suffocating under the weight of endless demands. Every single day, they are approached by people who want something from them: their money, their influence, an introduction, a moment of their time, a sliver of their validation. When you approach a powerful person with your sparkling personality, hoping they will sponsor your rise to the top, you are not offering them value. You are simply adding weight to their cognitive load. You are demanding their energy to process your existence. The first law of mastering the architecture of access is that you must become surgically useful long before you ever attempt to become close. You do not need the elite to like you. You need them to rely on you. Consider a different approach to that same private dinner. A quiet, observant strategist is also in the room. He does not tell jokes. He does not volunteer his personal history. He stands on the periphery, watching. He notices the CEO of a logistics firm rubbing his temples, discussing a specific hyper-niche bottleneck in Southeast Asian shipping routes. The strategist waits for the natural pause in the conversation. He steps forward, not to introduce his ambition, but to deliver a single, precise piece of market intelligence regarding a regulatory loophole in that exact region. He offers the solution clearly, concisely, and without asking for anything in return. Then, he steps back into the shadows. He did not ask for a favor. He eliminated a point of friction. Powerful people desire a frictionless existence above almost all else. The moment they associate your face, your voice, and your presence with the sudden removal of stress, the social dynamic fundamentally flips. You cease to be a petitioner standing outside the gate in the cold. You become a living asset. And assets are not ignored. They are brought inside and protected. This requires a complete rewiring of how you interact with authority. Stop thinking about how to impress them with your resume. Start diagnosing their hidden pain points. What is keeping them awake at 2 in the morning? What tedious, complex problem drains their focus? Identify it, solve it quietly, hand them the result. Most ambitious people fail because they are far too loud with their desires. They bang on the doors of the elite, shouting about their work ethic and begging for a chance. But you must understand this fundamental truth. Access is not granted to those who knock loudest. It is surrendered to those who hold the keys. And strategic utility is the master key to any room you wish to enter. But to provide this level of utility, you must first understand the specific world the powerful inhabit. This brings us to the next principle of access. You must perfectly mirror their reality, rather than forcing them to acknowledge yours. One of the fastest ways to destroy your perceived value is to try and connect by explaining your own struggles, your own background, or your unique worldview. When you do this, you are subconsciously demanding that a powerful person step down from their position and enter your reality. They will never do this. They do not have the time, the patience, or the incentive. If you want connection, you must learn to seamlessly inhabit their frame. This is not about crude mimicry. It is not about losing your identity or becoming a sycophant. It is the high-level art of strategic adaptation. You must observe their psychological cadence. Do they speak in rapid, aggressive, data-driven bursts? Or do they prefer slow, deliberate, philosophical observations? What specific vocabulary do they use to describe risk, reward, and loyalty? What is their baseline emotional temperature? If a ruthless venture capitalist speaks strictly in terms of leverage, scalability, and market dominance, you do not approach them talking about passion, dreams, and changing the world. You speak their native language. You adopt their rhythm. When a powerful individual hears their own psychological syntax reflected back at them, their neurological defenses lower automatically. They feel understood without you ever having to explain yourself. This level of sophisticated mirroring creates an invisible tether between you and the target. The powerful person begins to feel that you simply get it. They will not necessarily be able to articulate why they prefer your company over the dozens of other highly qualified individuals begging for their attention. They will just know that conversations with you do not feel like work. You are calibrated to their exact frequency. While everyone else in their life is generating static and noise, you are transmitting a clear, resonant signal. You become the polished mirror in which they see their own effectiveness reflected and amplified. The amateur enters a room and tries to draw all the gravity toward himself. He wants to be seen, to be validated, to be told he is special. The Machiavellian strategist enters the exact same room and studies the existing gravitational pull. He aligns his orbit with the heaviest object. He becomes indispensable by systematically reducing friction, and he becomes deeply comfortable to be around by reflecting the psychological environment of the elite. He does not ask to be let in. He makes it entirely irrational for them to keep him out. But becoming useful is only the first layer of the game. If they understand exactly how you operate, your utility quickly devolves into a commodity. Think about a master key. The moment its grooves and ridges are perfectly copied, it is no longer special. It is simply a piece of mass-produced metal. The exact same principle applies to your mind. The instant a powerful individual maps your entire psychological framework, knowing precisely what angers you, what excites you, what you fear, and what you plan to do next, you lose all leverage. You become a known quantity. And in the high-stakes arena of power, predictable people are immediately categorized as pawns. Consider a modern corporate environment. An ambitious mid-level director is determined to rise into the executive suite. He has been brainwashed by modern leadership podcasts that preach the gospel of radical transparency. Society tells him that vulnerability is the new strength. So, at a late-night networking event, surrounded by colleagues and quiet rivals, he drinks a little too much scotch and decides to be authentic. He passionately outlines his entire strategic vision for the next quarter. He confesses his insecurities about his current team and details exactly how he plans to restructure his department to win the board's favor. He walks away feeling a profound sense of connection, genuinely believing he has forged deep bonds of trust through his honesty. 2 weeks later, a senior colleague, the very man who quietly listened, nodded, and poured his drinks, pitches the exact same restructuring plan to the CEO. The ambitious director is left completely paralyzed, forced to watch his own blueprint be executed by someone else. When he complains, he sounds bitter and territorial. He traded his most valuable leverage for a fleeting, worthless moment of emotional validation. This is the brutal, unforgiving reality of human nature. Information is not a tool for bonding, it is the raw ammunition of leverage. Every time you open your mouth to explain your motives, your history, or your next move, you are handing the listener a loaded weapon. You are giving them the exact coordinates of your vulnerabilities. Powerful people never reveal their full hand. They are masters of the curated fragment. They give you just enough information to keep you engaged, but never enough to let you predict their next maneuver. They understand that mystery is not a theatrical trick. Mystery is a highly fortified defensive perimeter. When people cannot fully read you, they are forced to project their own assumptions onto you. They hesitate. They treat you with intense caution. And in the world of social dynamics, caution is the immediate precursor to respect. The primary mechanism for maintaining this perimeter is the ruthless weaponization of silence. Most people are absolutely terrified of quiet moments. When a conversation pauses, they feel a sudden, crushing pressure in their chest. They rush to fill the void with meaningless chatter, nervous laughter, or worst of all, the premature surrender of valuable information. This is a broadcast of profound internal weakness. You must train yourself to sit comfortably inside the silence. Picture a high-stakes negotiation where you are offered a deeply unfair deal. The amateur immediately begins arguing, defending his worth, and explaining why he deserves more. He exposes his desperation. The Machiavellian strategist does something entirely different. He simply looks at the contract, looks the executive in the eye, and says nothing. He holds the gaze, he breathes, he lets the silence stretch until it becomes physically heavy in the room. It is an unbreakable psychological law that the person who speaks the least controls the rhythm of the engagement. When you speak less than necessary, your words acquire a dangerous gravity. The people around you begin to listen closer, leaning in to catch the rare sentence you choose to offer. More importantly, by forcing the other person to endure the conversational vacuum, you compel them to speak. They will nervously fill the air. They will bid against themselves. They will reveal their hidden anxieties and their true baseline strategies. You become the apex observer and they become the subject. But guarding your words is insufficient if you do not also guard your physical and digital presence. This brings us to the architecture of scarcity and the absolute necessity of selective availability. Modern technology has trained you to behave like an obedient dog. You carry a device in your pocket that demands your immediate attention, and you comply without hesitation. You answer emails within 3 minutes. You agree to every calendar invite. You pick up the phone on the first ring. You believe this proves your relentless dedication. You think it shows the elite that you are reliable and indispensable. You are entirely wrong. Constant availability communicates a total lack of internal boundaries. It tells the powerful person that your time has absolutely no intrinsic value and that your universe stops spinning the moment they summon you. You become the equivalent of tap water, always running, completely expected, and entirely unappreciated. No one marvels at a resource that is endlessly abundant. To command deep respect, you must master the art of selective absence. You must artificially introduce friction into your availability. When an email arrives from a high-status individual, unless it is a literal emergency, do not reply instantly. Let it sit. Let them experience the microscopic sting of waiting. Let them wonder what you are doing that is more important than catering to their immediate whim. This is not about playing petty, childish games. It is about retraining their neurological response to your existence. Human beings are biologically wired to chase what retreats and to ignore what is ubiquitous. When your presence becomes a rare commodity, its market value skyrockets. The people who casually dismissed you when you were always hovering nearby will suddenly seek you out when you vanish into the background. Remember the rule of this game. Access is not granted to those who knock loudest. It is surrendered to those who hold the keys. Tactical silence and strategic absence are the heaviest keys you will ever forge. When you combine them, you stop being a desperate petitioner begging for scraps of attention. You transform into an enigma. The elite are surrounded by sycophants who will talk for hours and appear at a moment's notice. When you deny them both your words and your immediate presence, you shatter their pattern. You force them to recalibrate. You force them to respect the space you occupy. Once you have mastered the weight of your own absence, you must master the geometry of your approach, because walking through the front door is a trap designed strictly for the masses. The front door is where the crowd gathers. It is the public email address, the official application portal, the crowded networking event where hundreds of desperate people hold their business cards like lottery tickets. It is the highest point of resistance. The elite fortify the front door specifically to filter out the unimaginative. When you approach a powerful person directly, you trigger all of their defensive alarms. You become just another face in a relentless army of individuals demanding their resources. The intelligent player completely ignores the main entrance. They understand that powerful individuals do not operate in a vacuum. They exist at the center of a complex, heavily guarded ecosystem. Surrounding every king is a court of invisible gatekeepers. The chief of staff, the quiet business partner, the trusted legal advisor, the senior executive assistant. These are the side doors, and they are almost always left unlocked for those who know how to quietly turn the handle. Imagine you are trying to secure an opportunity with a notoriously reclusive, high-level investor. The amateur spends 6 months sending cold emails, trying to guess the billionaire's schedule, and waiting outside his office building. He throws himself against a reinforced steel wall and wonders why he is left bruised, exhausted, and empty-handed. The strategist looks at the exact same objective and completely changes the angle of attack. He studies the periphery. He maps the invisible network of influence. He identifies the investor's chief of staff, a woman who controls the calendar, filters the information, and quietly shapes the billionaire's daily reality. The strategist does not pitch the chief of staff on his brilliant ideas. That would immediately expose his motives and ruin his positioning, reducing him to just another opportunist trying to use her. Instead, he researches her specific operational headaches. He attends the smaller, less glamorous industry panels where she is the one speaking. He approaches her afterward with a single, highly relevant insight about streamlining data flow in portfolio management. He provides pure utility to the gatekeeper. He builds a lateral relationship based on quiet competence. Over the course of months, he becomes a trusted resource to the person who holds the actual keys. He never once asks for an introduction to the boss. He simply makes her life easier. And this is where we arrive at a cold, deeply uncomfortable truth. It is time to drop the protective delusions you have been carrying for years. You have likely spent a significant portion of your life believing that the system is simply rigged against you. You tell yourself that the elite are a closed, corrupt club. You comfort yourself with the narrative that you are just unlucky, that you lack the right pedigree, or that nepotism is the only way inside. You cling to these stories because they absolve you of responsibility. They protect your ego from the mirror. But the issue is not bad luck. The issue is your absolute refusal to read the geometry of power. Being consistently locked out of exclusive rooms is not an accident. It is the strict mathematical result of your own tactical incompetence. You broadcast signals of profound desperation. You persistently attack the strongest point of resistance. You create the exact psychological incentives that force powerful people to block you. You are not a victim of the system. You are just playing the game with your eyes closed, angry that you keep walking into walls. Once you absorb that sting, your entire worldview must shift. You must realize that true access is never about aggressive pursuit. It is a byproduct of lateral positioning. When you embed yourself in the periphery of a powerful person's network, you begin to utilize the most lethal weapon in social dynamics, third-party validation. When you constantly announce your own value, it is perceived as marketing. It is cheap. It is immediately subjected to skepticism and scrutiny. But when that chief of staff casually mentions your name to the billionaire over morning coffee, praising your sharp insights and your quiet competence. Your value becomes an undeniable fact. You did not have to say a single word. You allowed the ecosystem to do the heavy lifting for you. You created a scenario where the target's own trusted inner circle is lobbying on your behalf. They are doing the selling for you. This is the ultimate application of forcing the world to come to you. The desperate man sprints toward the throne room, tripping over himself to be noticed, begging for a single moment of eye contact. The Machiavelli player constructs a gravitational field in the hallway outside. He becomes so deeply entrenched, so consistently valuable to the supporting cast, that his reputation slowly filters upward. He practices extreme patience. He knows that desperation is loud, but true influence moves in total silence. Eventually, the powerful person at the center realizes there is an asset operating just outside their direct vision. Curiosity takes over. The billionaire turns to his chief of staff and asks to bring you in. The dynamic has now entirely reversed. You are not begging for a meeting, you have been summoned. You enter the room not as a stranger pleading for a chance, but as a vetted entity. The groundwork of trust has already been laid by proxy. You bypassed the spam filters, you circumvented the heavy armor, and you arrived at the table with your leverage completely intact. The elite look at you not as a petitioner, but as a peer in waiting. This is how empires are infiltrated. Not by siege, but by slowly and methodically becoming an indispensable part of the landscape. You have learned to move like a ghost through the corridors of power. You have discarded the frantic energy of the amateur. You know how to bypass the front door, align with the gatekeepers, and let your reputation pull the elite toward you. Yet, successfully slipping into the room means absolutely nothing if your arrival triggers the deepest, most dangerous instincts of the people already sitting at the table. Once you bypass the gatekeepers and finally sit across from power, the real danger begins. You are finally in the room. You are hungry, brilliant, and desperate to prove that you belong there. And this is exactly where the vast majority of intelligent, capable people dig their own graves. They allow their ego to take the wheel. Picture a high-stakes advertising pitch. A young, fiercely creative art director is sitting next to his veteran creative director, presenting a massive campaign to a demanding corporate client. During the presentation, the veteran makes a slight tactical error in his explanation of the market demographics. The young creative, eager to showcase his genius and secure his own status in the eyes of the client, immediately interrupts. He smoothly corrects his boss. He dazzles the room with his flawless logic, his sharp wit, and his absolute command of the data. He wins the argument, he wins the room, and in that exact moment, he quietly destroys his entire career trajectory at that firm. The young creative thought he was displaying supreme competence. He believed the elite would recognize his superior intellect and reward him for it. He completely failed to understand the fragile, volatile architecture of the executive ego. People at the absolute top of the hierarchy bind their entire identity to their superiority. Their confidence, their authority, and their psychological stability are entirely dependent on feeling like the smartest, most capable person in the room. When you publicly expose their flaws, even accidentally, even in the pursuit of the best possible idea, you do not look like a prodigy. You look like a lethal threat. And powerful people do not keep threats in their inner circle. They systematically isolate and remove them. Proximity to power requires the absolute cold-blooded suppression of your own need for validation. You must never outshine the master. You must deliberately choose to look slightly less brilliant than you actually are, ensuring the individual above you always reflects the brightest light. If you have a groundbreaking strategic pivot, you do not launch it across the boardroom table like a missile to prove your dominance. You subtly plant the seed of that idea in the mind of the person above you. You ask a guiding question. You present a piece of data and let them draw the conclusion. You allow them to claim it, water it, and present it to the world as their own stroke of genius. The amateur's ego screams in pure agony at this thought. They demand immediate credit. They need the applause. They need everyone to know they were the architect. The Machiavellian strategist remains perfectly detached. They understand that public credit is a worthless vanity metric. Real power is invisible. It is the quiet, methodical accumulation of leverage, while the person standing in the spotlight becomes completely, helplessly dependent on your shadows. Let them have the crown. You control the strings. But surviving their ego is merely a defensive posture. To truly cement yourself into their inner circle, you must understand the utility of friction. Most people attempt to bond with powerful figures through relentless flattery. They shower the elite with compliments. They nod aggressively at every mediocre point. They contort themselves to agree with every spoken word. This is nauseatingly predictable. Powerful people are utterly desensitized to praise. It washes over them like white noise. It signals that you are just another subordinate trying to curry favor. If you want to forge a bond made of iron, you do not align with their virtues. You align against their enemies. Human beings are ancient, tribal creatures, permanently hardwired to unite against a shared threat. Nothing accelerates trust faster than mutual opposition. Pay close attention to what frustrates the powerful person. Who are their rivals? Which competitor is aggressively eating their market share? Which regulatory body is stifling their growth? Which specific executive in a rival faction is trying to undermine them? Once you identify their specific point of agony, you position yourself not as a cheerleader, but as a specialized weapon in their ongoing war. You do not need to manufacture unnecessary drama. You simply provide tactical insights, intelligence, or operational friction that helps them defeat the entity that keeps them awake at night. When you bleed on the same battlefield, even metaphorically, the dynamic shifts permanently. You transition from a professional acquaintance to a wartime ally. They stop looking at you as an employee or a network connection and start looking at you as a vital extension of their own immune system. And you must apply this exact cold pragmatism to your own enemies. The weak man is entirely consumed by his grudges. When he encounters a rival, his vision narrows, his emotions flare. He complains to anyone who will listen, wasting massive amounts of cognitive energy trying to destroy the person who insulted him. The strategic mind views an enemy entirely differently. An enemy is the most brutal, honest auditor you will ever have. Your friends will lie to you to protect your feelings. Your rivals will actively hunt for your blind spots, expose your structural flaws, and brutally punish your laziness. They force you to remain sharp. They show you exactly where your armor is thin. Furthermore, a rival is often just a highly effective asset you have not yet co-opted. History is written by leaders who absorbed their fiercest competitors, turning them into invaluable lieutenants. If an enemy possesses deep market knowledge, aggressive ambition, or a specialized network you lack, destroying them is a tragic waste of resources. The highest form of intelligence is neutralizing a threat by quietly aligning their self-interest with your own. You remove all emotion from the equation. You calculate the exact geometry of their greed. You let them win a minor battle only to smoothly integrate them into a larger war where you control the entire board. This total detachment from petty vengeance separates the emotional amateur from the untouchable operator. You do not hate your enemies. You harvest them. You have learned to navigate their egos and leverage their enemies. But when the moment comes to finally ask for the kingdom, you must speak the only language they cannot ignore. You must completely abandon the concept of mercy. Picture a loyal, deeply exhausted employee stepping into the corner office to ask for a partnership. He has been with the firm for a decade. He has sacrificed his evenings, his weekends, and his physical health to ensure the company's success. He sits down across from the executive and builds his entire argument around the concept of fairness. He talks about his unwavering loyalty. He talks about what he rightfully deserves. He subtly mentions his growing family, the rising cost of living, and the personal sacrifices he has made, desperately hoping to pluck the fragile strings of human empathy. The executive listens patiently. He nods slowly. He offers a warm, deeply sympathetic smile, and then he politely declines. The employee leaves the room crushed, bewildered, and bitter. He does not understand why his loyalty was not rewarded. The reason is brutally simple. He appealed to morality, and in the high-stakes arena of power, morality is a polite fiction written specifically to keep the masses obedient. Now, picture the Machiavellian strategist entering that exact same room to ask for the exact same partnership. He does not mention his loyalty, because loyalty is expected of subordinates. He does not talk about what he deserves, and he certainly never begs for sympathy. Instead, he slides a single, heavily researched dossier across the desk. It outlines a highly specific, untapped revenue stream in an emerging market. He calmly explains exactly how elevating him to partner will personally enrich the executive, while simultaneously neutralizing a looming threat from a vicious rival firm. He appeals strictly and unapologetically to the executive's greed, his status, and his self-preservation. He secures the partnership before he even stands up to leave the room. This is the coldest, most vital truth of human nature you will ever learn. People act primarily according to their own self-interest. Empathy is a highly conditional luxury. Greed and self-preservation are biological imperatives. When you want something from someone powerful, you must relentlessly frame your request as a direct solution to their problem. You must perform the mental translation from what you desire to what they acquire. You must explicitly demonstrate how handing you the keys makes them richer, safer, or more dominant. The weak plead for justice, hoping the universe will reward their suffering. The strategic mind offers irresistible leverage. But there is a distinct, lingering danger to understanding this reality. Once you fully internalize how transactional and ruthless the world actually is, you will feel a profound, chilling disconnect from the people around you. You will begin to see the invisible wires. You will recognize the blatant hypocrisy of those who preach morality while acting entirely on their own self-interest. The temptation will be incredibly strong to call it out. You will want to broadcast your newfound clarity, to act edgy, and to aggressively rebel against the polite, suffocating fictions of society. This is a fatal, amateur mistake. The world aggressively punishes visible nonconformity. If you speak your cold calculations out loud, society will label you a cynic, a manipulator, or a threat. The system will isolate you. It will mobilize against you and block your ascent before it even begins. To survive and conquer, you must practice the highest form of social camouflage. You must think exactly as you like, but behave flawlessly like everyone else. Externally, you must appear deeply conventional. You smile warmly at the appropriate times. You use the soft, agreeable language of corporate culture. You feign interest in the mundane trivialities that consume the masses. You blend seamlessly into the background noise of polite society. This camouflage allows you to cultivate and protect your most valuable long-term asset, your reputation. Your reputation is the invisible armor that allows you to move freely through heavily guarded corridors. It speaks for you before you ever open your mouth. You must build a sterling, unshakable public image of being cooperative, pleasant, and utterly reliable. Guard this image with your life. Never engage in petty, emotional outbursts. Never allow yourself to be dragged into public drama, office politics, or ideological crusades. You must maintain a pristine, comforting public facade, while your internal calculations run cold, dark, and entirely detached. No one should ever suspect that you are playing a different game entirely until you have already won it. Let them vastly underestimate you. Let them believe you are just another compliant, predictable gear in the machine, right up until the exact moment you take absolute control of the engine. You now understand the architecture of the invisible world. You see the underlying mechanics, the hidden incentives, and the psychological traps that keep the average person locked on the outside, forever confused about why their raw talent is continually ignored. You know that strategic utility is the only currency that matters to the elite. You know that silence is a lethal weapon, that absence creates deep psychological leverage, and that direct, aggressive pursuit is the absolute fastest path to rejection. Tomorrow, when you walk into your office, your university, or your next high-stakes negotiation, you will no longer operate like the desperate masses. You will not overshare your plans. You will not beg for public validation. You will locate the side door, carefully align with the invisible gatekeepers, and allow your sheer, undeniable strategic value to pull the elite toward you. You will stop forcing doors open and start becoming the type of person doors naturally open for. Because you finally understand the foundational law of human dynamics. Access is not granted to those who knock loudest. It is surrendered to those who hold the keys. The world is strictly divided between those who are played by the unspoken rules and those who master them to write their own. Most people will listen to this, feel a brief surge of understanding, and return completely to their old, comfortable delusions tomorrow. A select few will let it permanently alter their behavior. Decide which one you are. If you are ready to stop being an outsider and learn the rest of the game, stay connected. Subscribe. The illusions are gone, but the strategy is just beginning.